The story revolves around an ordinary novice chef who struggles hard and becomes the best in the world. The film begins with Chef Carl Casper, who runs the kitchen at Gauloise in Brentwood, Los Angeles, nervously preparing for a big night. A prominent food critic and blogger named Ramsey Michael is scheduled to review the restaurant, and Carl wants to impress him with a special menu. However, amidst the hectic kitchen activity, Carl takes a short break to pick up his son, Percy. Even though Carl is late, Percy remains calm, and the two make a quick stop at a farmer's market to pick up fresh ingredients for the evening's dishes. Back at the restaurant, tension is mounting. Carl is eager to showcase a unique and creative menu to make a strong impression on the critic. However, the restaurant's owner, Riva, insists that they stick to the standard menu. Carl is frustrated by this, but after a brief argument, he reluctantly agrees to serve the usual fare. The argument is all about Carl wanting to try new and exciting dishes, but the restaurant's management wanting him to stick with the usual menu. After the food critic, Ramsey Michel, reviews Carl's work, he delivers a harsh critique. Instead of praising Carl, he links Carl's cooking to that of an elderly relative who tries too hard to be liked by handing out money. He also makes an unkind comment about Carl's weight, which deeply affects him. Feeling discouraged, Carl steps outside and is soon joined by Molly, a hostess from the restaurant. Molly tries to comfort Carl by telling him that he is one of the best chefs she has ever worked with, and praising his cooking skills. The rest of the restaurant staff also show their support and appreciation for Carl's talents. To help lift his spirits, Molly invites Carl to her place. There, Carl prepares a special meal for her, and after spending some time together, he heads back to the restaurant. When Carl returns to the restaurant, he works through the night to put together a new menu. The next morning, his staff arrives and tastes the fresh dishes. They enthusiastically praise his cooking and advise him not to worry about the Twitter situation. Carl is confused and asks them for details, but they do not tell him anything. Later, while Carl is cooking for Percy at home, he asks his son about Twitter. Percy mentions he has an account, so Carl asks him to set one up for him. Once Carl is online, they discover that Ramsey Michael's review has gone viral. Not realizing that his response would be public, Carl quickly types out a reply to Ramsey, thinking he is sending a private message. Instead, his response is visible to everyone. Carl's response to Ramsey's review quickly goes viral, and he gains a large number of followers. The next morning, Percy checks his tablet and realizes that Carl's reply was posted publicly. Percy reminds Carl of this, and Carl's online argument with Ramsey continues to escalate. In response, Carl invites Ramsey back to the restaurant for another chance to impress him. Later, when Carl drops Percy off at his ex-wife's house, she invites him inside. She suggests that he consider starting his own food truck business to be his own boss. Carl listens, but decides to decline her offer. After their brief conversation, he heads back to the restaurant to focus on his work. At the restaurant, Carl is excited to serve his new dishes to Ramsey, but Riva insists on keeping the old menu and demands that Carl apologize to Ramsey on Twitter. Carl refuses to either apologize or change the menu, leading to a heated argument. Eventually, Carl decides to quit his job. Riva then tells Tony, another staff member, to run the restaurant without Carl. After Carl leaves, Tony takes charge in the kitchen, and Ramsey returns to his home. However, in the restaurant, Ramsey is served the same dishes as before, which frustrates him even more. Ramsey tweets another negative comment about Carl. Meanwhile, Carl is at home, preparing his own dishes. When Ramsey tries to talk to Carl, Riva tells him that Carl is not available. Seeing Ramsey's latest tweet, Carl returns to the restaurant to confront him. He vents his frustration, explaining how challenging it is for chefs to satisfy customers and the effort required to prepare every dish properly. His outburst is recorded and posted online, which damages his reputation and leaves him without a job. Carl then contacts Jen, a friend of his ex-wife Inez, who suggests he appear on a show called Hell's Kitchen. Carl declines the offer. Faced with limited options, She also considers going underground until the situation calms down, but Carl dislikes both suggestions from Jen and quickly hangs up. Carl then talks to Inez, who offers her support, while Percy sees the aggressive video of Carl online and is affected by it. Later, Carl heads to a bar to meet up with his staff. They hang out together and discuss the video that has been circulating online. Afterward, Carl goes to see Molly and shares all his frustrations with her. Molly listens and suggests that Carl take a break. When Carl mentions his concern about Percy being affected by the situation, Molly advises him to talk to Percy and really understand how he feels. She also tells Carl that he should not look for another job working for someone else. Following Molly's advice, Carl decides to visit Percy the next day. However, when he arrives, he finds Percy is still upset and does not want to talk. Just then, Inez shows up and takes Carl outside to the yard for a conversation. Inez suggests that they all go to Miami together to visit her father. At first, Carl refuses because he is out of work and does not have any money. Inez explains that Percy is particularly upset because Carl has not been able to follow through with the plans he had for them. She points out that since Percy's nanny cannot join them, Carl can look after Percy while Inez is at work. Inez also mentions that Percy was born in Miami and that Carl's cooking career began there. She believes that a trip to Miami might help Percy feel better and give Carl a chance to reconnect with his son. After considering Inez's reasons and realizing the potential benefits for Percy, Carl reluctantly agrees to the trip. In Miami, Carl, Percy, and Inez explore various locations. While there, Carl, Percy, and Inez visit a restaurant where they meet Inez's father, who is singing at the bar. They join him for lunch and enjoy a meal together, catching up and spending quality time with him. During lunch, Carl reconnects with his passion for Cuban cuisine. Inspired, Carl decides to bring this flavor back to Los Angeles by opening his own food truck. To get started, he plans to meet with Marvin, Inez's ex-husband who lives in Miami. Carl visits Marvin's office, where they briefly chat about Marvin's personal life before discussing business. Marvin offers Carl an old run-down food truck. As Carl examines the truck, Inez and Percy arrive. Inez decides to leave and asks Carl to look after Percy while she goes elsewhere. Carl and Percy then begin working on fixing up the truck together, cleaning it and making necessary repairs. During this process, Carl gets frustrated with Percy for accidentally throwing away a metal item he wanted cleaned. Carl scolds him, but quickly apologizes. He then takes Percy shopping for the equipment they need for the food truck. At the store, Carl explains the purpose of each item they buy. Before leaving, he gives Percy a chef's knife, advising him to handle it carefully and keep it safe. Back at the truck, Carl and Percy struggle to load the new equipment. They seek help from some men in the lot who are playing cards, but due to a language barrier, the men do not understand and ignore them. Just then, Martin, one of Carl's former staff members from the restaurant, arrives to help. Martin has chosen to leave his promotion at the restaurant to join Carl in starting the food truck business. The three of them, Carl, Percy, and Martin, get busy setting up their food truck. After everything is in place, Martin asks Carl and Percy to go to the market and pick up some groceries, while he manages the truck and gets things ready. Carl and Percy head to the market, buy the necessary supplies, and return to find Martin preparing dishes in the food truck's kitchen. As they work, Carl and Martin both teach Percy some basic cooking skills. Percy helps out and tastes the dishes they prepare. They begin serving food to people for free, trying to attract customers. During this time, Percy accidentally burns a sandwich. When Carl points this out, Percy argues that the burnt sandwiches are fine since they are giving away the food for free. Carl uses this opportunity to explain to Percy that being a chef involves high standards, even when the food is free. He takes Percy aside, explaining how much joy he finds in cooking and serving people with care. He teaches Percy about taking pride in his work. Carl emphasizes the importance of maintaining quality and doing things right, regardless of the situation. Percy quickly grasps what his father is teaching him. Carl's lesson helps Percy understand the value of putting in the effort and not compromising on quality. They return to the truck and continue serving food, ensuring everything meets their standards. This experience brings Carl a deep sense of satisfaction and happiness, as he is finally able to cook and serve food the way he loves. Later that evening, after their shift, Carl, Percy, and Martin relax together. Carl shares his plan to start by selling their food in Miami and then gradually make their way back to Los Angeles, making stops along the way. Percy expresses his desire to join them on the trip since he has a school break. Initially, Carl suggests that Percy should fly in business class with his mother, Inez. However, after Percy mentions his school break and asks for permission from Inez, Carl decides to let him come along in the food truck. Martin then suggests that Carl and Percy should head back to the hotel for the night. He plans them to get more ingredients in the morning, stock up the truck, while he paints it to give it a fresh look. Although Carl is hesitant about spending more money on paint because his credit card is almost maxed out, Martin assures him that his cousin knows someone who can handle the paint job for them at a good price and takes the task to himself. Reluctantly, Carl agrees to the plan. The following morning, Martin brings the freshly painted food truck to their hotel. Carl and Percy load up the truck and start their journey. As they travel across the country, they serve Cuban sandwiches and other dishes. Percy helps promote their trip by updating their location on Twitter. People start to recognize Carl as the lava cake guy and take photos with him. Their food truck quickly attracts a steady stream of customers. Percy uses social media to boost their visibility, posting short 6-second videos that capture highlights from their trip with daily 1-second snippets of their journey. By geo-tagging their locations, Percy manages to draw in even more customers, helping to make their food truck venture a success. In New Orleans, Carl and Percy enjoy their time together, exploring the local market and shopping. After serving food at various locations, they arrive in Austin. One night, after their shift, Carl sits down with Percy and explains that, eventually, Percy will have to return to school, and things between them will go back to the way they were before the past 2 weeks. He acknowledges that their time together has been special, but he wants Percy to understand that their daily routine will resume as it was before the trip. Although disappointed, Percy reluctantly accepts what his dad has said. When they return to their hometown, Carl drops Percy off at Inez's house. Before Carl leaves, Percy gives him a hug and reminds him to post the final summary video of their trip, which consists of daily 1-second clips. Carl agrees to take care of it and heads home. At home, Carl reviews the video Percy made, which shows their journey and the strengthening of their bond. Realizing how much closer they have become, Carl decides to call Percy. He offers him the chance to help with the food truck on weekends and after school. Percy is thrilled by this news and quickly shares it with Inez. In the final scene, Carl, Percy, and Inez are seen working together on the food truck. Ramsey approaches Carl and initiates a conversation. During their talk, Ramsey explains that although he was once a fan of Carl, he was disappointed by the meal, and he felt it did not reflect Carl's true talent. He reveals that his harsh review was meant to push Carl to improve. Now, Ramsey wants to make amends by offering to fund a new restaurant where Carl would have complete creative freedom. 6 months later, the successful new restaurant is closed for a private event, the remarriage ceremony of Carl and Inez. The scene highlights a joyful and hopeful moment as Carl and Inez celebrate their new beginning together, surrounded by friends and loved ones.